Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel BethChatsBooks. Now today is going to be a vlog video of my progress judging the quarterfinals non-fiction group C. So I originally uploaded a video of me judging the octafinals group D fiction, and I've been kindly invited to judge the next round, which is the quarterfinals for the Booktube prize. And so I decided I might try out vlogging this one. So I have till the end of May to read these 6 books. So I thought maybe I could do a bit of a chat video on my progress with them and see how that goes. So I really enjoyed judging the first round, the octafinals fiction round for the Booktube prize. And I noticed upon watching a lot of the Booktube octafinals videos that people did vlogs, and that was quite interesting to see their progress as they read them. I think that that might be the best thing for me because I have a lot of thoughts upon initially finishing a book, and considering we're on the 20th of April today, I thought that a lot of these books I would only be allowed to talk about at the end of May, which means that I might be a bit rusty upon how I felt about them. So I'm going to introduce the 6 books, and I've got one that I've basically almost finished. So I'm going to talk about it as if I finished it, because unless in the next 20 pages anything changes, I've kind of already got some thoughts that are conclusive to the book. And then I'm going to check in with you every so often when I finished a book or started one and let you guys know and see how vlogging goes, because I haven't done any vlogging in a long time. So the 6 books that I have, the first one I'm going to talk about is the one that I'm waiting to be shipped. So I have all of the 5 books apart from this one in physical form at the moment, and that is Solitary by Albert Woodfox. And the next book that I have to read is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I also have Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb. Charged by Emily Bazelon. Parkland by David Cullen. And Underland by Robert Mcfarlane. So I ended up doing the stupid thing and reading the shortest book first, which is How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. Now, I've only got about 20 pages left of this, but I thought I would do some wrap-up thoughts because I don't think anything's going to change much in these 20 pages. So I was quite excited to read this book because in the octafinals round, I've watched a few videos of judges who talked about their thoughts in that category, and this rated quite highly on a lot of the judges' videos. Obviously it was in the top 3 that went through, but a lot of people put this either in their first place or second place of the videos I've seen, so that's not conclusive of what all the judges thought, but obviously the representation that's on the Booktube video judgings that I've watched, it has ended up being quite high, so I had quite high expectations going into this. This is a very well written book. I think Ibram X. Kendi has made it very accessible for people of a non-academic leaning, so that anybody can read this book and learn something new. And I think it's quite a difficult topic because anti-racist covers a lot of different strands of racism. So in here he goes through gender racism, obviously racism, class racism, sexuality racism, body racism, culture racism, and he does have a set formula in which he talks about these topics. So he introduces a chapter, for example, culture, body, white, black, race, gender, sexuality, and he puts definitions at the beginning of each chapter. So what a racist viewpoint of that topic is, so cultural racism and what that means, and then what an anti-racist stance on culture is. And then from there he interweaves his own anecdotes and kind of life experience into the story as well. So the bits that focus on his own story and his own narrative I found really engaging, and those were bits that I could really get immersed in, and they almost felt like a fiction or a memoir, definitely not stereotypical non-fiction. They were written in a very narrative style that was very engaging for the reader. And I like that he simplified some of these explanations, because sometimes a lot of the jargon around subject matters, particularly this one, that has a lot of vocab, can turn a reader off, but he's made it quite simplistic so that readers of different abilities can still access this book. However, it became almost formulaic in its style. Every chapter starts similarly with the definitions, what it means to be racist or anti-racist in the topic matter, and then it starts going through that. There was quite a lot of repetition, so he repeats a lot of things to emphasise his point about what is the difference between being anti-racist and racist ideas, which, when you read the entirety of the book, do seem to form that formulaic repetition pattern, which didn't necessarily irritate me, but it's just something that might irritate other people. That was the only niggle of this book. But what I found really interesting was that he talks about black on black racism. He talks about how people who have this passivity to racism, who want to see the world as colourblind, or that are too scared to use definitions of race. For example, this is a Latino woman, or this is a black man, because they think that that's not in the PC form and world that we live in, that we shouldn't be saying, oh, they have that origin or they have that skin colour. He said that passivity can also be seen as a sign of racism and a form of racism, in which we are trying to create this world that's colourblind, when in reality people do look differently, but they shouldn't be judged about that. And he basically says in a nutshell that anti-racist policy is recognising that we should be blaming policies and society structure for why racism occurs, not individual groups of people. And that to have an anti-racist stand, we should go in and attack the structures that have put the hierarchies of races in place instead of individual groups. So he says blacks are sometimes responsible for not recognising that they have black on black racism because of their class structure. They blame poor blacks for being in poverty by stating that they're not as driven as middle class black people. And that was really interesting, and he acknowledges himself that he has had in the past adopted ideas that were classed as racist against his own race, and that I've got into the bit about gender and sexuality and how he's almost adopted through his environment a homophobic stance that he's then been actively trying to reverse. So it's really heartening and comforting to read that Ibram is acknowledging that he feels the same way that other people have. So this isn't a book about blame culture and to make you feel guilty, and it doesn't isolate any particular race, culture, gender or sexuality from reading it, which is really good. It's very, very inclusive, and it doesn't have that lens of judgment. Obviously, because Ibram is a black man, a lot of these books and policies and articles on these kind of subjects do try to alienate certain races. In particular, if it's a black man writing, they try to isolate a white community from reading it, or to feel that white shame. This book doesn't do that, so I thought that was quite good, because obviously going into this subject I was a little bit apprehensive about how it would make me feel as a reader, and it doesn't do that. And also it's really interesting, it talks about segregationist policies and opinions and assimilationist ideas and policies, and how both of them are a form of racism, and he makes it very clear how to be anti-racist and how to adopt anti-racist policies. So very, very interesting. So I've given it 4 stars. I haven't given it a full 5 stars because, like I said, it is a bit repetitive in form and structure. I applaud this book. This is very strong. Obviously it's the only one I've read at the moment, so it's at the top of my pile, but I definitely think that this has strong potential to be in my top 3. Well, obviously, because I haven't read any of the other books, I don't know what will happen. So that's the first one. Unless anything drastically changes, that's where that book stands. And if I don't talk about it in the next videos, then I'm happy with that just being the main bulk of my discussion around that book. So I'm planning on starting one of the other books today. Now, I feel like I should start with Sunderland, potentially, because it looks like it might be the biggest one to get through. This one and Charged seem to be the bulkiest books, if you can see. So I don't know on this one. I will probably pick between these two. So in my next little video, I'll inform you guys of which ones I've started and my initial thoughts about the book I choose. So that's all I wanted to say for now, and I'll check in with you guys later. So just a quick check-in. I have finished How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi now. So I finished the last 20 pages of it a few days ago, maybe a day or two ago. And again, nothing's majorly changed. I've decided to keep the 4-star rating. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think there is room with this list for a book to surprise me and surpass this book, because the more I've reflected on it, it's got really, really great themes and I've really enjoyed it. However, because all of these books that I'm going to read were in the top 3 of their category, they can all be similar ratings for me and they can all be just as enjoyable as this. 4 stars, and we'll see how I get on with the others. So I've decided that I am going to read Robert Mcfarlane's Sunderland next, because that is the biggest book on the list. So I need to get a dent into that as soon as possible. I just thought I would do a quick little reflection because it is something that's been playing on my mind a lot. So when I first did the Quarterfinal fiction group D, I didn't really have a strategy or a plan, and I noticed looking back on my video that it is a little bit disjointed because I wasn't really as clear and precise about particularly second and first place as I could have been, and I didn't make the effort to make that clear with myself and therefore to make it clear with the judging and to make it clear with the video. So I feel like that's something going forward I don't want to do. I want to make sure that these are very clear and that people watching my videos and that Robert, when he judges it, knows exactly where I ranked them. But obviously it was my first experience judging any round, judging any prize, so I have been watching the Booktube playlist and I'm about halfway through that playlist. I really enjoy seeing what other judges in the first round thought about their category, and what I have noticed is that I've watched quite a lot of judges that have judged the same category with very diverse and different opinions on the exact same books. For example, Ice at the End of the World, one of the non-fiction picks that ended up going through in its category, had 2 polar opposite responses from judges. People either really loved the science and the history and the density of the book, and yet in other judges in the same categories videos, those same elements were things that really turned them off from that book. I think what it comes down to is that everybody has very individualistic reading preferences and tastes. So my strategy going forward is I am literally just going to judge the books on my own personal preference, and that's how I'm going to rank them, my enjoyability. I know non-fiction is going to be very different judging it than the first round, which was fiction for me, but I've noticed that there's been a lot of controversy with other videos of non-fiction about whether we should rate them based on the important subject matter, on how well it's written, how engaging it is, whether it is informative, all these different things. And I think to put less pressure on myself, I'm literally going to judge them based on my own personal enjoyment. So some books like Robert Mcfarlane's Sunderland I'm a little bit apprehensive about because I don't know if it will be a non-fiction that I love, whereas How to Be an Anti-Racist I knew I would enjoy. And we're going to see how it goes, but I just wanted to do a very quick interlude between How to Be an Anti-Racist and the next book, and I just wanted to kind of process these thoughts while they're here. So I'll check in with you guys soon. Hi guys, so just a quick check-in from the last little clip. So it's been a few days since I filmed the last little clip, and I have started Robert Mcfarlane's Sunderland, and I am only 55 pages into this book. This book is 425 pages, so I have quite a lot of reading and catching up to do with this book. So I'm off for today, it's about lunchtime here, and I am going to just plough on really hard with this book. But my strategy has been changed slightly. So I was going to decide between Sunderland and Charged and then read them because they were the heaviest. In terms of page number, the densest, the biggest books to read. But I'm really enjoying Underland so far. I can't say too much in terms of the fact I've only read 55 pages, so I haven't had a great period of time with this book, but I'm really enjoying it. It's gone through the section that is about Somerset, and he's been doing underground caving with somebody that he stayed with there, and that's really interesting. The writing is very lyrical, it's very narrative, it's interweaving different stories of history, and it's beautifully written. But what I'm noticing with this is a book that, had it not been on my prize reading, I would really be wanting to take my time with. This might be a book that I could have dipped in and out of over a period of a month while I was reading other things and just however, I do need to finish this for the prize, and I'm kind of glad I've started with it now, but considering I'm around the 25th of April now, and I know that a month goes very quickly and I need to get all the other books done, my strategy is going to be to try and read, particularly for getting Underland done, 2 books at a time. I might not continue to do that if I end up giving myself more time in May because I've ticked these off at a similar time. And I'm not necessarily saying that all of my reading will be 2 books on the go at one time, but I've decided I'm going to try and read Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb at the same time as Underland, because this is about a therapist who gets a therapist, and people said it's kind of a little bit like self-help genre, but she talks about her patients and then her experience of being a patient through therapy, or a client, whichever way you want to state it. But I kind of get the sense that this is going to be a bit more of a gripping read than Underland, in the sense that I think this is going to be a story weaved into non-fiction, a bit memoir-y potentially, which I just know from experience I can get into a lot faster than this kind of book, which is a slow burn kind of non-fiction that focuses on so many different areas of nature, and it interweaves history and myth, but almost like a good fine wine that you want to take your time with. And there's so many paragraphs that I would love to reread or read aloud, but time is of the essence, and I'm getting towards the end of April, so we need to crack on. So I am going to check in with you once I've actually dented this book a bit more and started this one, so I can give you some initial thoughts on this, but I'll check in with you guys later. Hello everyone, so it's just another quick check-in with you guys about how my reading is going. So it's the 26th of April today, and I am about 215 pages into Robert Mcfarlane's Underland, so that is around halfway point for this book, just about halfway. So I am having a surprisingly pleasant reading experience with this book. It's not what I anticipated it to be at all. So I think although this is a non-fiction and Richard Powers' understory was a fiction, I think I was subconsciously making comparisons between what this would be based on my reading experience of the understory. So I'm just going to put this down for a second because it's quite heavy. So I expected that book to be predominantly about trees, and one thing that I had an issue with understory about was that it was structured similarly to how trees grow and intertwine, so all the characters intertwined, and also it was a very lengthy book on one particular subject, so it was intense in its subject matter about trees and everybody's connection to trees, which I didn't dislike. I didn't actually dislike the book overall, but I found that maybe it went on for a bit too long, and the subject matter, like I've said previously, nature writing isn't my go-to genre. So I was very sceptical going into this one because I know that this is a non-fiction nature writing book, but it's completely different to what I expected it to be, and I think that's why I'm having such a good experience with this. So first and foremost, Robert Mcfarlane writes in a really beautiful way. It's about individual chapters of an individual topic, and it's interwoven with the author's own personal experience. So Robert Mcfarlane, in each chapter, meets a new group of people and goes on a different challenge to learn more about what he calls the Underland, which is the place below ground in the world, in the earth. So each chapter is a slightly different topic. So, for example, one of them was about Epping Forest and about trees there, and ironically that's ended up being one of my favourite chapters so far, just because of the way he described the communication between trees. That chapter is what Understory was supposed to make me feel and didn't for some reason, but the way he talked about the romantic nature of trees growing together and how fungi play a really important role in helping trees communicate, and this exchange between them was written in such a beautiful way that it really captivated me. Things like Invisible Cities in Paris, which I found so captivating, about the idea that people underground in Paris were actually building a replica of what it was like above ground, and there's all these different tunnels, and a lot of the population of Paris go down into these underground chambers and have parties, or they create artwork, and there's just a thriving underland within a city. Each topic I knew little to nothing about. The best way to describe it is it's story time. Each new chapter feels like story time to me because I didn't know anything about the topic. Finding myself getting lost in these stories like I would a fiction, like I would a set of short stories. So I think that is a massive talent to Robert Mcfarlane, and I did not expect to connect with it as I have done. He writes in such a way that it's incredibly vivid and makes you feel like you're there. That sense of claustrophobia of being underneath the earth was so well written that you have this 3D sense of physically being there. The way he describes when he goes through some tunnels or places underground and having to physically move his head to the side to get enough air, but that he physically can't go backwards or forwards. As someone who I am quite a claustrophobic person in terms of I don't like being in small spaces, I love this book because it's as close as I will probably ever get to going underground because of my fear of enclosed spaces, but it feels like I'm there. Moment, I think a little bit controversial, but I am enjoying it more than How to Be an Anti-Racist because of the surprise factor with this. I'm hoping to crack on in the next few days and finish it, so I will wrap this up for you in the next video. I'm thinking the best thing to do is just to get the second half done, and then I can do my full wrap up of this experience. But so far, really enjoying it. And then the other one that I'm reading obviously is Maybe You Should Talk to Somebody by Laurie Gottlieb. So I'm only 50 pages into this, and that's because I actually expected this one would be one I would flip to when I get a little bit bored of the other one, but as you can tell I have not been bored of the other one, so this one I've been trying to actively get myself into reading. So I'm not that far on in terms of the main hulk of the book. So the premise is that she's obviously going to have a therapist because she's had a bit of a breakdown in her relationship with a partner. He's surprisingly broken up with her, she doesn't know why, and that's then encouraged her to go and seek a therapist because her friends have said maybe she should talk to somebody about this, even though she thinks it's a trivial thing to consider. They said maybe therapy will help you. So we're at the process where she's about to go to her first meeting with a therapist, but in between that we've had a few sessions that she's had with her clients because she's a therapist herself. Now I'm thinking that this book will be a very key an important text for me in terms of I would like to go into therapy, I would like to be a psychotherapist, and I am looking at doing some master's training for that. Maybe You Should Talk to Someone seems like it would be a really key and important text for me when I, fingers crossed, start getting into my counselling training, because it's made me feel comforted in where I want to go with counselling. So for example, she's been quite honest about therapists will also go to therapy throughout their careers and that they have to be self-reflective, things that I'm aware of and things that personally I'm quite excited to go into because I'm fascinated by how therapy works and how therapy can help other people but can help me. She references a lot that therapy is like a mirror and it projects back to the patient what they are saying. It's a mirror through which they see themselves, but it's a mirror through which you see yourself. And obviously as a therapist you have to be very proactive about challenging your own prejudices and your own interference in therapy sessions, things that I'm very aware of. It's quite exciting and interesting for me, just on a personal level, because this is something that I'm really interested in pursuing. And I've also found it really interesting how she's had this human nature to the experience of therapy. So for some people, they might not like that they think she's not necessarily being very confidential about her patients, that she might have seemed to be a bit judgy or disinterested at certain points in her therapy sessions due to what's happened in her personal life. I find that that is a comfort, to know that she's basically trying to acknowledge in this book she's a therapist, but she's also human. So this is proving really interesting for me, and maybe not for other people who don't want to pursue counselling or who aren't interested in therapy. I'm really excited to see where therapy goes for her, and whether that can teach me some more things and educate me more on how therapy will work for a therapist. The stories are really interesting. I like the little bubbles of wisdom that are coming out of this book about how to approach some particular patient. It's completely different to the other book, and I think that gives it some light relief. So this is far too early to call in terms of how I'll rank this and rate this, because it could just stay on a one-dimensional note going forward, which if it does, it might hinder my experience. It might make me place it more in the middle of the road rankings. But at the moment, I have high promise for this. I think that this could be something that I really connect with and that can do me a lot of good. So we'll see where this comes out. So I'll check in with you guys when I've got more reading updates to let you know about. See you then. Hello everyone, just another quick check-in video for this vlog. So I've just come back from work. It's raining outside. I was going to plan to do a walk, but it is literally thrashing it down, so I've decided to run a bath because why not? And it's my half day today, so I'm just going to relax and read. So when we last spoke, I was in the process of finishing some books. So I've managed to finish Robert Mcfarlane's Sunderland. So the second half of this book was very similar to the first. However, I think because it was just the same and I was literally only halfway through this book, I was expecting an elevation that maybe didn't happen. So I really still loved this book. I really loved all the chapters. He meets some interesting characters along the way, and he explores lots of different parts of Europe. The last section of the book focuses a lot around similar landscapes in Europe. So there's Finland, Norway and Greenland. So they're similar kind of landscapes and that kind of haunting side of nature, which I found interesting, but I did get confused between where we were towards the end. But overall, I don't want to say anything negative about this book. I loved this book. It really helped me learn a lot about what the underline means. I know I've talked about it a little bit more in the other clip, so I won't dwell too much on it. But what it has done, it has kind of made me put this in a very similar place upon finishing How to Be an Anti-Racist. So I've ended up giving this 4 stars, which I also gave this one, and it's left me a little bit confuddled. So I finished Robert Mcfarlane's last night, and I'm really torn between these two. These are very similar placings. I thought this was potentially going to be a 4.5 read, because when I was reading it I fell in love with it so quickly, but the second half it took me a little bit longer to get through, and I think that's because of work. This is a book as well that's very lyrical. It talks about nature, so when TV's been on in the background and things like that, I've had to reread passages. But this would be beautiful on audio because some of the descriptions are just stunning. And then I came to this dilemma of, how do I judge? Do I judge based on my own personal preference? Because I have said in the past clips that I would just judge on personal preference, but this book, I realised, I had a bit of an epiphany last night, is making a statement, and this book isn't really. This is more educational. It doesn't have an overarching argument. It's not trying to shame us for climate change. It's reflecting on the past and the future and what the future holds, but without the lens of judgment. It seems a bit more of an impartial narration and exploration in this book. Maybe I'm reading it wrong, but that's how I've read it, and this is more to enhance the subject matter of the Underland, which isn't as well discussed in nature writing. So I think this slightly was more revolutionary for me in the reading experience, because a lot of this subject matter I've already dealt with in my academic studies and at school, and it's a topic I'm already quite passionate about. So I think that this didn't educate me as much as this one, but this had more of an important statement to say. So what I've decided, purely because I think this book will get so much love already in this category, as opposed to this one, I think this is going to be a bit more hit and miss with people. And because this one blew me away in the first half, and I was really surprised that I liked it because I didn't really think I would like nature writing, I am literally going to put this a smidge, a hair's width, very small level up from this one. So these are basically the same at 4 stars, but I'm going to put this one as a higher ranking because of my overall enjoyment and its education factor for me personally. And I'm hoping that a lot more people will probably connect with this than this one, so I'm kind of rooting for the underdog a little bit here. So the placements for now are, this is my number 2 and this is my number 1 read so far. I still have Laurie Gottlieb's book to read. I'm going to try and get a lot done in the bath now. So I'm 200 pages, so I'm about halfway through this now. Really enjoying it, but I don't want to give too many thoughts until I've actually finished it. And since we last spoke, Solitary by Alfred Wood Fox has come through in the post. So I have realised that these last 3 books to read are all kind of about the justice system. I think Parkland's going to be slightly different because it's about the shootings and the implications, but these 2 are very much about the injustices in the American justice system. So these are going to be quite similar. So I might try and use Parkland as an in the middle book so that I don't read these 2 back to back. But I think the next one I'll probably read is Emily Bazelon's Charged, because I've heard this is also quite a big book. So what I'm planning to do is finish this, or as much as I can finish today, so that I'm going into May with 3 of the books under my belt, which will give me so much less pressure in May to get the other 3 done. So I'll check in with you when I have finished this book. Hello everyone, and just a quick catch up. So since we last spoken to each other, it is Sunday the 3rd of May, and I have finally finished Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Laurie Gottlieb. So I really enjoyed this reading experience. However, the last 100 pages, yesterday I was kind of forcing myself to finish this book, and I think the reason is because this, like I said, is really interesting and informative for me about the topic of therapy and psychotherapy, and how to become a counsellor, and what it was like during her training, what it's like having her own patients, and what it's like being a patient or a client, whichever way you describe it. However, I'm in the process of applying for a counselling course, and I have an interview next week, and I think that's really skewed my reading experience of this, because I've been very nervous trying to prep, and this almost feels like it's taking me back into the headspace of trying to think about counselling and think about this interview and what I want to say. So it actually made the reading experience stressful, because this is a little bit too triggering at the moment. So I found it really interesting. One of her patients on the surface seems like a bit of an arsehole, but then he has a deeper story to tell. One of her patients is a terminal cancer patient, and how she chose to deal with those things I found really interesting. How she dealt with her own issues. She had a bad breakup, and that's why she went to therapy. I found all of it really interesting, and I think I will give this a reread at a later date. This might be a really useful Bible text when, fingers crossed, I qualify as a counsellor, and then I can see how she did things, because I think the way that she approaches therapy will be very similar to how I would. I found a lot of similarities and connection with her, in the sense that she doesn't profess to be all-knowing about these topics, and she's a little bit self-deprecating and underconfident about her own abilities, which is something I can relate to, but that she wants that human connection, and the way she treats one of her patients, Julie, who's a cancer patient, the unorthodox way she develops their relationship in and out of therapy, is really interesting, that she allows herself to have a bit of a less conventional relationship with Julie, and how she does have a bit of transference. She has quite a soft spot for Julie, and the way that she plays with it, that she's never breaking professional rules, but she's taking things into account that she feels is necessary to allow Julie to have the therapy sessions that she wants, because obviously Julie's terminal. It's a different relationship. It's not about preparing her for the outside world, because her days are numbered, and that would be a futile exercise. So the way that she approaches a different scenario in therapy than the conventional was just so interesting. However, overall, I found this a stressful read, and I think that's just because of the time and place and situation I'm in at the moment. So I have only managed to give this 3.5 stars. I wanted to push to 4, because I think in another day, another time, this would have been 4, but at the moment I just don't think so, which is a shame, because this is really well written. I'm just going with my feels. Even thinking about it now is a bit stressful, because I know I've got so much to do for next week's interview. So yeah, 3.5, I'm afraid. So that leaves us at the moment with Sunderland at number 1, How to Be an Anti-Racist at number 2, and then Maybe You Should Talk to Someone at number 3 at the moment. And I'm going to start this afternoon, have a bit of a lazy day, and get some pages of this done. So I'm going to Recharged by Emily Bazelon, and then I can check in with you when I've got a bit more to talk about.